There's no denying it, a vast majority of us love superheroes, especially since childhood, whether it be in comics, games, anime, and the ever-growing cinematic universes, no matter how much we want them to end. But let's go back to a more simpler time where there weren't any shared universe films and characters were enjoyed in their own standalone stories, despite the many crossovers with other characters in media. You know, like Spider-Man. Spider-Man was one of my favorite superheroes and still is to this day. Even though I didn't read many comics in my childhood, Spidey is the one that got me into Marvel in terms of other media. I did watch the animated series from the 90s, but barely remember much of it other than the theme song and Spider Carnage near the end. It's just as dumb as you think it is. Of course, I watched all of the movies. The Sam Raimi trilogy I purely love for nostalgia. The first film was pretty good, the second one I love the most, and the third is a guilty pleasure looking back. I was open to the reboot films at first, but now I look back at them and think they suck so much ass. There are bits of wholesomeness in there, yeah, but the films are still garbage though. And later on, we would get his entrance in the MCU with Captain America Civil War, and a last-minute additional film in the Phase 3 lineup, leading to his appearance in the two-part Avengers finale. Oh, and Spider-Man Far From Home. I liked it fine, but Endgame is truly the end! But Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, oh wow. This is such a great movie, period. I thought I was gonna hate it at first, but the more I watch it, the more I love it. Most definitely my favorite movie of 2018, ahead of Infinity War. The sheer amount of dedication by making technical leaps forward in the animation. It has a well-written story, and it's funny. Like, really funny. I can go in depth about it for hours, maybe with a future analysis? Maybe. Just watch for yourself. That's pretty much my short retrospective with the webhead. In terms of the characters, Spidey really builds a connection with kids and adults alike. He has responsibilities, loved ones he truly cares for, he interacts with other people just like any normal person, and he's an all-around fun character. His quips and one-liners with criminals and his arch-enemies bring out the best in him. So I'm going to do a little marathon showing the web-slinger at his best. Starting off, the first 3D Spider-Man game released in 2000. When I was a kid, I played Spider-Man on the PlayStation at my cousin's place and loved it so much that I eventually owned a copy myself on the N64, red cartridge and all. I don't have that copy anymore, but the PS1 version is a good introduction to the game regardless, so I have this copy. This introduction has gone on long enough, so let's pop this in and see how it holds up now. The story is about as simple as you can get with an early 2000s game, so it's nothing really special aside from the occasional quirky pieces of dialogue. Not like anyone cares about spoilers for a 20-year-old game, but I'll put up this timestamp in the video anyway to avoid the occasional guy who will bitch about it. The game starts at a science demo hosted by a supposedly reformed Dr. Otto Octavius. Yeah, not buying that. He shows his new equipment, and we don't care what it does. But it does bring in conflict with what comes next. Suddenly, Spider-Man comes up on stage and takes off with it. Or is it Spider-Man? Obviously not, since Peter Parker is in the audience as it happens.
Last time I checked, I was Spider-Man.
His rival at the Daily Bugle, Eddie Brock, takes pictures of the scene and has a little incident with the imposter Spidey.
He's stealing Octavius's device! Oh no! He sees me! My camera! No!
Then we see a monstrous, twisted version of Spider-Man take over him, swearing revenge. Hell yeah, man. This is Venom, my favorite Spider-Man villain. The black and blue color scheme, his spider logo, his huge stature, sharp teeth and tongue leave quite an impression. And ever since I saw him, I looked more into his character and really dug the symbiote storylines. That and the Venom movie is another fun guilty pleasure of mine, mostly because I've been waiting for a movie about him for so long! Anyway, the police go on a manhunt for Spidey, two easily recognizable characters release a fog in New York, Spidey tries to clear his name, and Venom's huge misunderstanding from before leads to the most unlikely of team-ups. Later, they encounter symbiote creatures made by Carnage, Venom's spawn. And then you find out the imposter Spidey turns out to be Mysterio, the master of illusion. He was in cahoots with Doc Ock the whole time, and he is obviously the one who conducted everything to prepare the city for a symbiote invasion. And seriously, do you even care about the so-called mystery behind it all? This is about as predictable as it is stupid. Yeah, this story has not aged well at all. Anyway, Spidey defeats Doc Ock and Carnage at their secret underwater lab.
Whoa! What the? Is that Ock?
Okay, then Spidey makes haste with a monstrous version of Ock and Carnage together on his tail. He makes his escape, the villains get turned to the police, and that's all she wrote, ladies and gents. I want to point out that this is the first game that introduced me to pre-rendered cutscenes. Each character's face isn't very expressive, as they show only one still face like a mannequin, which is pretty humorous sometimes. They were animated very well for the time, but they definitely aged. On that subject, I also have this game on the Sega Dreamcast. Treyarch would port the game on that console in 2001 with some nice graphical touch-ups, and it just shits on the PS1 version in terms of looks. The character models here look so much better, replacing the goofy-looking faces from Black Cat and Rhino and the like, so they actually look like the characters. Even Spider-Man with the web lines on his costume. Yeah, if you ask me, Spider-Man without the black web lines in the PS1 version is like when you take out the red and white stripes out of Captain America's suit in Winter Soldier. Still a good movie all the same, but it doesn't work. Yeah, I know it's a stealth suit, but you can never take a couple colors out of an iconic character. Just here to represent America! Fuck yeah! You're probably going to ask, Justin, why didn't you play the Dreamcast version instead? One simple answer, I don't have anything to record high-quality Dreamcast footage. Yet. Nope, not even with my Elgato HD 60 capture card, so I'm stuck with playing this version. But fuck it, no matter which version, it's still the same game. If there's one thing I do like with the voice work, it's the narrations done by the amazing Stan Lee.
But this is just the beginning, Spidey fans. So get ready for a true superhero action thriller, packed to the brim with thrills and chills, twists and turns, more supervillains than you can shake a web at, and of course, non-stop web-slinging, wall-crawling action.
Hell yes! This game was my introduction to the greatest man who ever lived. He is a treasure, and he will not be forgotten. The rest of the voice acting is pretty cheesy, but enjoyable. When you approach the typical cronies for the first time, they yell, "Hey! Hey!" Yeah, that's how enthusiastically awful it sounds. But my favorite performance has got to be D. Bradley Baker being hilariously over the top as Carnage. Dude, you are awesome.
What color do you bleed, Spider-Man? Bet you weren't expecting that! Nice try! Come here! Come here! Here I come! You may have defeated everyone else, but you won't defeat me!
Anyway, the game begins with a basic crime, a bank robbery. Of course, being the noble superhero you are, you go and beat the shit out of thugs and save hostages. No, you don't get help from any of your super friends along the way. Black Cat is there to give you training when you start off, and the other superheroes are there as well, but what's the point of having them in this game? Cameos, bitches!
Excelsior!
Still, it is a nice strategy, introducing these characters to newcomers slowly but surely. The gameplay is pretty simple. It's a 3D beat-em-up where you can kick, punch, and use web attacks to defeat enemies. The latter depends on how many web cartridges you carry, the total amount being 10. But being that you can spend time with the basic moves, there won't be a time where you will ever run out of webs. It can be repetitive unless you consult the manual for his special moves. So once you know how to do them, you're all set. Still, they aren't quite as effective as the basic punches and kicks. But back to the webs. You can use them to fling enemies to the side with a clunky control combo, make impact webs, a web dome, and straight up trapping them. I just hope Spidey is allowing them to breathe when he does that. If there are no breathing holes in the webs, Spidey might as well be a cold-blooded killer. And of course, it wouldn't be Spider-Man with the trademark web swinging. Wait, hold up! What are the web lines holding onto? Are they touching the sky? God must be grabbing onto them as he goes, otherwise we would have had this. Looking back, I think the controls have aged horribly. It feels sluggish and clunky whenever Spidey moves, and there can be times where you try to make certain jumps and swings, but the button inputs don't respond that well. You have to be very specific with how you press the buttons. Another thing worth noting, especially in combat, is how the camera is laid out. You can't move it freely when moving. Sure, you can use the web target mode to move the camera, but that's mostly used for when you want to make your mark on web swinging to certain areas. All you have to do is stop moving, hold down the button, and move it around. But it doesn't help that the thing is pretty slow to aim with. You can even tap the button to recenter the camera. Well, this is pretty awkward. While fighting, all you're doing is constantly tapping the button just to get a better look at what's around you. Why not just use the right stick? Or better yet, have a lock-on feature? Sometimes doing that can be meaningless when you're not fighting because once you turn somewhere else, the camera can still be centered on Spidey. Does it want to be a free camera or a fixed camera? Make up your mind, game! With all of this, you have to be careful with platforms since there are very narrow places to get through. Yes, even the subway section with the huge wave of lizard men. But the worst parts when it comes to all of that is in the last segment.
You gotta be kidding. Okay, recap. A couple of 100 feet underwater, electrified floors and walls, and deadly turrets pointing straight at me. Oh, my day just keeps getting better and better.
Oh my god, this is all so bad. They want you to make some quick, efficient platforming while avoiding all this bullshit, and not touch that electrified floor. The most frustrating enemies have got to be the symbiotes. They have double the health and your webbing doesn't work on them, until you get something to make them burn. Problem is, along with power-ups like the spider armor, which serves as a second health bar, they are so scarce and it runs out fast. So here's a solution to all this. You go to the cheat menu and type in a special code, after you're done swearing at it. Wow, the developers added some hilarious attention to detail there. Anyway, the code is EelNats. That's Stan Lee backwards. Clever. And it unlocks everything, even the best costume in the game. Captain Universe! Anyway, with this costume, you're pretty much a god at this point while having his ass stare right in front of you. Stupid sexy Spidey. Double the damage, unlimited webbing, and invincibility. Don't believe me? Look at this. Yeah, I'm in control. You can't stop me now, motherfucker. Look, the unlimited webbing even gets carried over to the flame webs. Yeah! Burn, bitch, burn! Yeah, it's cheap, but considering how this game aged, I don't feel bad about it. There are also collectibles that come in the form of comic book covers, which don't do much other than get bragging rights when you collect them all. So overall, I think... What the hell? Oh, right! And this game was developed by Neversoft, the same studio that gave us the Tony Hawk Pro Skater series. Now that's a company no one's heard from in a while. I really love how they did their logo here. I think it's pretty much Whittle Me's first introduction to gore in general with this logo. Sadly, Neversoft went defunct in 2014. The mid-90s to the early 2000s was when they were in their prime, so I didn't find this out until much later. In Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, you can play as Spider-Man if you 100% career mode as a custom skater. That is a rad idea, and this game uses the same engine as the first Tony Hawk game, which is actually a modified version of the engine they used for the third-person shooter game Apocalypse, starring Bruce Willis. So they pretty much improved their in-house engine as they went along. Jesus Christ, wrap your head around all that. So overall, I think this game has not aged very well, but it is worth looking into to see how Spider-Man got started with 3D games. The archaic camera and the amounts of frustration are huge hurdles to get through. The gameplay is okay, the graphics are good for the time, the voice acting is enjoyably cheesy, and the music can be decent as well. There are those tunes that occasionally loop over and over again, but some are more catchy than others. There's even an awesome remix of the 60s Spider-Man theme. Perfection. I'm going to give Spider-Man 2000 a C-. It definitely showed its age, and there's really no good reason to want to go back to this one. But for the grandfather of many 3D Spider-Man games to come, things will only get better from here. So, I'll see you guys next time when we take a look at Spider-Man 2 for the Nintendo GameCube. This is Justinfinity, and I have no limits.